Hello, this is Talking Europe. It's been a long time in the making, but the EU Parliament and EU Council have provisionally agreed to simplify and speed up the return of migrants staying in the bloc unlawfully. Proponents say that it's urgent to deal with the non-enforcement of court decisions to send back asylum seekers whose applications have failed. Critics say that the governments are giving in to anti-migrant sentiment as they face pressure from rising populist forces across the EU. And they believe that the EU deals with third countries are problematic, and also the so-called return hubs. We're going to debate these questions with our two MEPs. Cecilia Strada is an Italian MEP from the Socialists and Democrats. She's vice chair of the Delegation for Relations with the MASH-REC countries and shadow rapporteur on the establishment of a list of safe countries of origin. Welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
And we're also joined by Charlie Weimers, a Swedish MEP from the European Conservatives and Reformists. He's the vice chair of LIBE, the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, and also shadow rapporteur on the common system for the return of third country nationals. Welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
Charlie Weimers, is this deal on migrant returns a good deal?
Absolutely. It's the missing link of the migration pact. We cannot have a system in which there's an 80% chance of you staying in Europe if you enter here illegally. We only enforce around 1 out of 5 return decisions today. So we need stronger tools. We need to be able to pressure countries of origin to readmit their own citizens, and this will provide for that.
The rate of returns is obviously fluctuating. It was 27% in the very latest one, but so between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. Cecilia Strada, what is your take on this deal? I mean, I know you have a lot of reservations, particularly on the aspects of detaining children and things like that. What are your main reservations?
Well, I do have a lot of criticism, of course. First of all, this is not bringing more harmonization to Europe, since the most steps and most part of the procedures will be defined at a national level. So this will lead to different application of the pact in different member states. Also, the return regulation, only a small part will enter into force now, while the vast majority of articles will enter into force after 12 months. And in this period, we will have both legislation combined working together, and this will probably bring a chaos in national courts. Then, when we're talking about returning those who do not have a legal permit to stay in Europe, we really need to understand who are these people. I do a lot of inspection in the Center for Returns in Italy, where we find persons that have been living in Italy for maybe 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, that have family and children, Italian children, and they lost the permit to stay in Italy because they lost their job. And Italian law says that if you lose your job, then you lose your valid permit to stay. But clearly, these are not people that are threatening our society, so we need to understand what are we talking about when we're talking about these people. I think that this regulation will not bring more security. The contrary, will undermine our social cohesion.
Charlie Weimers, the deal is basically going to have a mutual recognition of returns orders across the EU. Is that a significant innovation, and is that actually enforceable?
It is enforceable because the current system provides incentives for individuals to move from one member state to another to have their case tried again anew, and it really delays and obstructs returns, and people play the system as it is today, basically, and we shall not allow for that.
Let's talk about the hubs. There is one which has been called a kind of template for future offshore hubs. There is this deal, of course, between Italy and Albania. And Cecilia Strada, you've actually done some inspections there. It's called Zadar, this place in Albania. What have you seen there?
Well, actually, yeah, it's a bit different from the idea of return hubs, because in the center in Albania, they're under Italian jurisdiction, completely under Italian jurisdiction. You have the Italian police there, and Italian laws apply. But what we saw is that even under Italian jurisdiction, because of the fact that it's there, it is outside EU, outside Italy, you cannot uphold fundamental rights. So we met people that were, first of all, they were deported there without them or the lawyers or the family even knowing that they were about to be deported and brought to Albania. Then, of course, the health system is very different here and there. So there is no equivalence in the fundamental rights that these people are experiencing there. And but then again, we saw a lot of, like in every center for returns, we saw a lot of anti-conservative act, attempted suicide, broad desperation, because of course people that were living in Italy, in some cases really for 20 years, they are like exactly deported away from their grandchildren who are Italian. So if the Center of Jadr is a model, I think it's a model of how not to do things.
What's your response to that?
Well, I would like to add that every year in Europe, around 500,000 return decisions are issued, and only 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 are enforced. Now, so we have a lot of people that we would need to deport to their home countries, and return hubs provide a very important opportunity for member states to actually minimize the risk of absconding, for instance.
But they're going to be outside, as your colleague said, that they're not going to be under EU jurisdiction if they're outside, if they're fully outside the EU.
But every deal that the EU strikes is governed by the treaties. So we will adhere to the fundamental values of the European Union, for sure. I mean, the same way Italy obviously abides Italian law in the center in Albania, and to say that they don't have human rights because it is in Albania, that would be to say that Albanians lack human rights because they don't have the same health service as Italy. That's preposterous. I'm sorry.
I didn't say that. I said that since the principle of the Italian government is the center in Albania is exactly equivalent to a center in Italy, and that's how they can, for example, transfer people from there to Albania without the decision of a judge, for example. No? If they are equivalent to the centers in Italy, then you expect to have exactly the same level of protection of human rights. When you have a very different health system, for example, of course, your health is not protected in Albania as it was in Milan or in Rome or in Turin. This is not to say that Albania does not respect fundamental rights, but to say it is not equivalent, of course. And since really it's a principle by the Italian government, they should be equivalent. Then you're talking about the agreements that will be done between member states and third countries. Actually, there are arrangements, not agreements. In the text it says arrangements, which is a bit different because arrangements are not necessarily legally binding. And this is something. And the next point is how can we monitor the respect of fundamental rights in a center, in a third country, under a third country jurisdiction? We will not. For example, now we MEPs are allowed to enter in our member states and also in other member states, European member states, to visit, for example, the Center for Returns, Welcoming Center, etc. Will we be allowed to enter these kind of centers in third countries? We don't know. Depends on the arrangement that the single member states will make with these countries. So I don't think it's really the same in terms of respecting fundamental rights.
Well, the European Union is known for being very strict on fundamental rights, and we have systems of monitoring it in our own agencies, for instance. So I'm sure we will find ways of ensuring that human rights will be respected, and I'm sure that members will be able to have a very, very strong oversight on this. So the warnings against this are just pure speculation, I would say.
Okay, and what about putting the minors in prison for more than 2 years? Families with minors in prison. Families with minors that did not commit any crime put in prison, and you may tell me, but that's the last resort. to avoid, for example, absconding. But it's so broad, the variety of cases under which a person will be put in prison that cover basically all the cases. So we are getting ready to put families with children in prison for more than 2 years.
Well, to call it prison is not true.
Detention
and they are
centers.
free to leave for their home countries any day. Any day. And what you're saying, in effect, is that if you play the system, if you get into Europe illegally and you meet someone and you get a child, then you're exempt. Then you get an amnesty. Is that the socialist view on rule of law?
The socialist view is that we should avoid, by all means, the people trying to get to Europe for work, which is, by the way, is what our societies need, the migrant workers.
Not from the third world.
Not from the third world.
No.
Okay, I don't use concept like third world. We don't use concept like third world.
Okay, global
in
south.
academia, it's
Not
maybe
from the
20
global
years,
south.
but apart from that, our position is that we should avoid, by all means, people embarking in dangerous and illegal crossing of the Mad Sea, for example, where they risk their life after enduring suffering tortures in Libyan prison, for example. To avoid this, we need legal pathways. The beautiful rule of law, the light of law, legal pathways.
Finally, on the question of legal pathways, Charlie Wemesch, because we're running out of time now. Is that the solution, is to open more legal pathways to reduce incentives for illegal entries?
That's just another way of saying legalize the illegal. And we don't need that. What we need is less migration from the global south. What we need is to address segregation, crime, and social problems in our own societies instead of importing problems from other parts of the world.
Of course, we do still have a lot of concerns about the human rights situations in third countries such as Tunisia and Libya, which have been pointed out by the UNHCR and other organizations. So we'll have to watch that space once this agreement actually comes into force. But for now, I want to thank our two guests, Charlie Wemesch from the ECR and Cecilia Strada from the Socialists and Democrats. And thanks for watching us here on France 24.